I am sorry that this has taken so long, but I have Treb Corey here of, um, okay, it says we're now live. Um, so
I see it on the Substack right now.
Oh, you do? That's great, because I do not yet. Hi, everybody. I will get there as soon as I can, so I can see your comments, which I can't yet because Substack is not being my friend right now. So, okay. We're going to go with this until I'm going to keep talking, and hopefully I'll get it in between. And let me start again. I apologize if you've already heard this stuff, but I am going to introduce this podcast and Treb Corey. All right. So, as you know, this is Freedom Over Fascism Live. I'm here streaming on most Tuesdays and Wednesdays afternoons at 1 p.m. on Substack, YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. And we are pleased to be a member of two different podcast networks, the Democracy Group and Banner and Backbone, which is also streaming this live today. I'd like to invite you to press the hearts in the chat and subscribe to Freedom Over Fascism and Banner and Backbone. I do not yet see the chat, but I am working on it. So hopefully I will see you in there in just a moment. And in case I don't, then I apologize for not being able to see the chat. So all of my content is free, but your financial support is really appreciated because, you know, I'm doing this solo, and every subscription and donation helps feed my family. I know there are a lot of creators out there asking for your support, and I appreciate any support you can send. There's a buy me a coffee in my bio, and I promise I will not use that at Starbucks. And so here we go. So right now, here we go. I found us. So hi, everybody. Press your hearts, please, so I know that I'm in the right place. So today, I'm going to welcome Treb Corey, the legal director of the Orders Project, which is a nonpartisan program created by the National Institute. Oops. Today is not my day. The flu is really killing me, and it's coming out in the technology, and I apologize to everyone. Okay. Treb Corey is a retired U.S. Army. All right, everyone, you're really going to have to be patient with me today. The Orders Project is a nonpartisan program created by the National Institute of Military Justice to assist military personnel in understanding their options when faced with orders they believe may not be legal. Treb Corey is a retired U.S. Army judge advocate with over 20 years of service and a proven record as a military judge, appellate counsel, general counsel, and senior legal advisor. During his military career, he held key leadership positions, including military judge at Fort Stewart, staff judge advocate at Fort Jackson, deputy staff judge advocate for U.S. Army Pacific, and deputy chief of the Government Appellate Division. His service included deployments in support of Operations Iraqi Freedom and Enduring Freedom. Lieutenant Colonel retired Corey earned his LLM from the Judge Advocate General's Legal Center and School, his JD from Duke University, and both his MA and BA in history from Clemson University. Yay, history majors unite. Exactly. He's a member of the South Carolina Bar and has served as an adjunct professor at the University of South Carolina School of Law. And I as we move forward, so let us start talking about what's going on right now.
Of course.
In the last week, and I started reading about you before the last week, but we have seen a lot of members of the U.S. Congress who have been members of the military or the intelligence service go out in an ad, say, remember your oath, which is to the Constitution, and remember that you are obliged to follow legal orders, but not follow illegal orders. And that, I think, can get kind of confusing. There's a lot of double negatives in there. And knowing that we've got a situation going on in the Caribbean where it is unclear with what the United States is doing is in violation of international law or the UCMJ or everything else. I wonder if you could talk in general about what you guys do to help service members who may come to you, what the UCMJ says and how you help support service members. And then we'll get to general specifics about what's going on today and yesterday and tomorrow in the country.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with what we do and how we do it.
That would be great.
The Orders Project, we, like you said, we're nonpartisan. We are looking out for service members. I am an attorney, as you described, and we have a referral network of attorneys that are primarily former JAGs, some retired, some just had prior service in one of the military JAG corps, or they are familiar with the military justice system. So we all understand the law of superior orders, and I'm sure we can discuss that in a little bit. We understand the culture of the military. We understand service members. We can speak their language. We've been there. We have given orders before. We have received orders. We've executed orders. We've executed orders we didn't necessarily agree with. Maybe it was not a good policy or a good plan, but those aren't reasons not to obey an order. So what happens is if a service member has an issue that they believe they're facing a potentially unlawful order, they contact us. We have the Orders Project, or ordersproject.com is our website, and we have an email address and a Signal contact. They can contact us. I take the phone call or email. I will talk to them. I'm essentially a referral attorney. It is an attorney-client privilege conversation, so what they tell me cannot be disclosed, as if any other attorney-client relationship. At that point, I will then assess, hey, you do need some legal advice now or soon, or maybe I'll just talk them through the issue and, hey, you don't need legal advice right now, but I'm glad you called because you may need legal advice next month or whatever. So once I have listened to, heard what the issue is, I then get them in touch with an attorney. We have a list of referral attorneys. I get them in touch with one of the attorneys, and then they establish an attorney-client relationship between that attorney. That attorney then provides them with legal advice, with moral advice, with ethical advice, and whatever then results from that. And we're really kind of out of it at that point. So it is, I am a way to get service members in touch with knowledgeable attorneys who can give them the pointed legal advice that they need at these difficult times.
So what kind of calls in general do you get? What do they kind of sound like? What are the kinds of things that people ask you?
Well, so a lot of what we're getting right now, and we can talk about this in a bit too, is really more future potential hypothetical things. Hey, I have received orders to go to this unit. I think this is what's going on there. What can I do, or what do I do? At that point, because they don't have a legal issue right now. Lawyers, we want to know what the facts are. Right now, you're talking about hypotheticals, and it's great that they call, because then we talk them through. Hey, here, if you go to that unit, or if you go here, and these are the orders you receive, that's potentially a problem, that's when you need to seek further, deeper legal advice and call us back and we'll get you in touch with it. So the first is the hypotheticals. Some are specifically about the direction that they believe some of the policies are going that they're uncomfortable with. Being uncomfortable with a policy is not a reason to not follow a lawful order. So I tell you, and I'm going to kind of back up a little. I tell you that we're looking out for the service members' interest. We are not looking for reasons to tell service members to not obey orders. We're not out there looking for, the spark, the ember, whatever. We believe that, in fact, that service members they might be caught in the middle of a partisan debate, and they may take bad legal advice from, something they see out there, and they may be willing to disobey an order that our legal advice would be don't disobey it because it is not clearly, manifestly, patently unlawful. So you need to do it. So we're not out there looking for reasons to tell service members not to obey orders. So we get the hypotheticals, and then some of them about individual things that those service members may be going through or where they're moving. We get some that are just worried about potential issues with the politicization inside their unit, those things. And then, of course, the two big issues right now are domestic deployments with the National Guard and then the strikes against the alleged drug boats in the Caribbean and the Pacific. So those are the two big pots that we're seeing on things that service members are really worried about. Then plus there's a lot of the hypothetical stuff. And I really welcome the hypothetical calls. We're not going to be able to give you specific legal advice on what to do, but we're going to tell you if you're going to a unit that's conducting this operation and you get there and this is what's going on, you can call us back and we can talk you through what's happening.
So, what is it that you refer to? I mean, where is your basis of information in terms of when you're past the referral stage and somebody's asking you a hypothetical or a real life question? How is it that you come to your conclusions about how you're going to recommend what you're going to recommend to them, whether an order is lawful or unlawful? Can you tell us about where those laws exist, about the UCMJ and anything else that is relevant right now?
Yeah, of course. So the Uniform Code of Military Justice is the primary statute that controls military discipline, military justice, and it is codified in the United States 10 U.S. Code 800, etc. And those are United States statutes. For National Guard units, they have their own uniform codes. The majority of them mirror or are very similar to the United States Uniform Code. And just like an attorney in civilian practice, we have case law. We have, in fact, I would say that the Uniform Code of Military Justice has more guidance because we have the rules for courts martial that are executive orders signed by the president that expand on the Uniform Code of Military Justice. Then we have case law, most of it U.S. case law, but because potentially you're dealing with law of armed conflict violations, we also look at U.S. code, civilian code, and international law. All of that helps us decide what's happening. The other piece when you are taking a legal situation is the facts. And we have to get those from the service member. Who gave you the order? What exactly was the order? Or was it written? What exactly is it you're being told? Because the facts matter, and you change a small fact, and the analysis changes for us. So just like any other attorney, we get primarily our legal analysis comes from the United States Code, the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and case law, and then the facts come from the service member, whatever they're telling us.
Do you get groups of service members, or is it primarily individuals who come to you?
We have not yet had groups of service members. I can foresee a situation where that could happen in the future. One of the reasons we have an attorney referral network that is somewhat robust, but I would love to grow it. Because one of my concerns is 10 or 15 or 20 service members all call at more or less the same time because they're all involved in the same situation or operation, or whatever is happening, and they all need help. And we need to have the capacity so we can support lots of service members.
So my question, so you mentioned it a little bit in here, and a lot is coming up, particularly around the Caribbean, but we'll get back to the National Guard. The international law that may or may not be applicable, and what treaty obligations that we have as a country. So how does international law play into what you might, the case law and the UCMJ law, that you might advise a service member about?
Okay, so on the domestic front, generally it doesn't. If there's domestic law, the Posse Comitatus Act, the Insurrection Act, that control, limit, whatever deployment of National Guard and certain active duty service members domestically. On the international side, the body of international law certainly informs how we're analyzing. So if you violate the law of armed conflict, the law of war, if you intentionally target a non-combatant, for instance, that is a violation of the law of war. It is also a violation of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, because all of that is subsumed into the Uniform Code of Military Justice. And service members, commanders, everyone has a duty to follow the law of armed conflict. And when I was a JAG officer, I gave briefings all the time on the law of armed conflict. Soldiers received those annually, or at least they did until a year or two ago. On the law of armed conflict, it was part of basic training. It's part of all of the career courses. It is a built-in part of the military training. Every year you get training on the law of armed conflict.
Okay, so there's plenty of resources out there in terms of what the law is. I have a question here from a veteran, a Navy veteran, Melissa Corrigan. She wants to know how someone who is actively on board one of the ships in the Caribbean could get in touch with you guys. She said, is there a way that sort of sidesteps emails which are monitored?
We have Signal, and I don't know what I don't know what capabilities, what personal communications capabilities are on a ship and a deployed Navy ship. The other thing we really have is Signal and email. If there was another way that they could do it, that I know the email is monitored. So beyond that, probably the message I should send out is, if you know you're going aboard a ship and you're about to deploy to that in support of that joint task force, get in touch with us beforehand so that we can hopefully give you some advice, some preemptive advice beforehand.
Can you say what your signal is in case anyone here has people on board any of those vessels that might want to get in touch with you?
Yes, if you'll give me a second.
Melissa says Signal is good. Usually they can get through that way.
It is at theordersproject.76. I can put it in our live chat here. I don't know if that'll go out.
In the Substack, it'll go out. Yeah.
Well, I put it in the
Oh, in our chat. Okay, so yeah. I will find that and copy it in.
Thank you.
Or I will not. Studio chat. Oh, can you give that to me again? I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's at theordersproject.76, and the and order and project are all individually capitalized.
The orders project.76.
Yep.
All right, there it goes. Melissa says this is gold. She wonders also whether you can tell us if anyone has reached out to you from Southcom, but she says it's a stretch. She knows you might not be able to answer that.
I'll just say that we have had service members reach out about that mission.
Okay. Um, so let's go back, kind of just chronologically. So say, let's talk about the National Guard, Posse Comitatus, and the Insurrection Act, and the how the Trump um, administration has sent National Guard and active military troops to various places within the United States. Can you talk about the underlying law there, and then the kinds of questions you have gotten from service members, and in any hypothetical way you need to answer what you would tell them?
So the underlying law is, I'll just kind of, it's confusing. It's there's Posse Comitatus Act, there's Insurrection Act, there's a couple other authorities, and one of the problems we've had is the administration will claim one authority, and then when it goes to court, because so many of these have been challenged, and that's another problem, then maybe the legal conclusion is based upon a different one. So that's part of the problem we're having. If you've followed all the court cases, and few people have been able to follow them all, it's like a tennis match. It's this court says that the deployment is unlawful, then this court says it is, and we're looking at different deployments, different domestic deployments for different missions. So when I talk to a service member, and it's hard and it's complicated. Where we are now, though, no, the Supreme Court has not ruled definitively on any of these. The lower courts often, as a practical matter, they may declare this deployment unlawful, but then they give what's called a stay. They say, hey, you got 15 days for you to appeal, because they understand the chaos that would happen if you had to pull soldiers out and then send them back in, and the chaos. So they understand, hey, there's going to be an appeal. I'm not the final arbiter. It's not my final decision. So they allow the government and both sides to stay it. But it's a tennis match. It's a ping pong match. It's back and forth. So there's no definitive guidance right now on the legality of these deployments, which takes us to what the advice I would give to a service member is: you need to then obey the orders to deploy, because you have a duty to obey an order unless it is manifestly or patently unlawful. That means it is just obviously unlawful. So for now, because these orders are at least arguably lawful, some courts have said they are. The Supreme Court has not made its final decision on the biggest case. Right now, the advice is to obey those orders to mobilize. And what you do then once you mobilize, then those are other questions and other issues. And it could become very complicated, which is why, if Specialist Wilson came to me and said, hey, I was just ordered to deploy to a certain city and conduct this mission, and if the Supreme Court gives us some better guidance, and we have some we have some clear rules on what the Guard and what the domestic deployments should and shouldn't be, at that point, we can give pointed advice. For right now, though, it's a gray area. They should contact us. We can talk to them, but generally we're going to say you need to deploy because it's not clearly or manifestly unlawful.
Okay, so you use these words clearly and manifestly unlawful.
Right. Yes.
What do they mean?
It means that a normal person would know without thinking twice that that's unlawful. And the easy scenario for the law of armed conflict is if you are ordered to target a civilian non-combatant, somebody is not in the fight, and they're a civilian, and a commander says you need to target them. That is clearly, manifestly, patently unlawful, because a normal person would understand it. If you ask, a National Guardsman, you have to deploy to a certain city, it's not right now clearly, manifestly, patently unlawful, because the law is all over the place on it. That may change, but for now, that's where we are. So, law of armed conflict, law of war violations that service members get every year, tell them what the patently and manifestly unlawful things are. The problem is we're not operating in that environment. We're operating in a very unclear gray area right now with the deployments, the strikes on the alleged drug boats, etc.
So, moving along to the Caribbean and the strikes on the alleged drug boats, um, there's been a lot of question, and I'm wondering whether it's kind of a distracting and irrelevant question about whether whatever's going on is sort of covered under war, like war crimes, laws of war, because of the ambiguity of the situation. Is there anything definitive you can say about whether actually this is just irrelevant and needs to just go under the general sense of what you guys do, or whether it's highly relevant and people should pay attention to the distinction?
That's a good question. I'll say that. So whether the overall actions are lawful, there's the law of international or law of armed conflict. It says when nations can go to war against each other, we're not at war in armed conflict against a nation. It's a alleged narco-terrorist group. And there's domestic laws. There's U.S. laws on what you can and can't do. I think what you're getting at, if it's under the law of war, law of armed conflict, that's much more permissive. You are allowed to kill people under the law of war. I mean, that's what war is, for better or worse. Whereas under normal U.S. code, your ability to kill someone is basically restricted to self-defense. So if we are not under the law of armed conflict, then the legal restrictions are much tighter. And if people think it's a law enforcement operation, the Supreme Court has been very specific on when law enforcement is authorized to use deadly force. And they haven't looked at drug boats coming up on the high seas, but I don't think that would be one of them.
All right. So, all right, so that clarifies it a little bit, but only a little, because the government is claiming a war situation,
right,
where no war has been declared, or it's kind of one-sided. So when you have folks, let's go back to the general question, which is in the news the last few days, which is, okay, say that you are targeting a boat ship, whatever size it is, because of whatever reasons that the government says is lawful, but they say kill everybody. To what extent is, if you're in a situation where the laws of war apply, where is the line between killing combatants or non-combatants, and where is the line between murder and collateral damage?
Those are very, very complicated questions, and that's why there's Army. That's why there are JAGs at most staff levels helping answer those questions. The law between killing and so when someone is engaged in participating in hostilities, whatever those hostilities are, they are a lawful target. If they become hors de combat, HORS space DE space combat, it's not an English term. It means they're out of the fight essentially. If they are surrendering, if they are wounded and unable to continue fighting, if they are a shipwreck survivor, then they are no longer a lawful target. Now, that does not mean you have to. It can get very complicated here, but that does not mean you have to quit fighting around them just to protect them. That if you're otherwise conducting a military operation, you don't have to stop and protect them. But it does become part of what's called proportionality, whereas you can't do excessive damage to non-combatants, to civilians, to whatever in relation to how much military advantage you're getting. So that's what collateral damage is essentially. It means people who are not participating in combat or infrastructure, et cetera. It isn't the target, but it still gets destroyed. And if your military advantage, if you're doing something that helps you win the war, it is acceptable under the law of war to accidentally kill some of the non-combatants, to destroy civilian infrastructure, et cetera. So that's what you're getting into. Like I said, it's complicated processes. That's why there are military lawyers at most levels advising on these, and that's what, to take this back to me. That's why individual service members who don't have military lawyers advising them, that's why we're here for them.
Right. So when you're advising military members, my question is, who is going to judge them? Is that going to be a civilian court, or is that
No,
going
it's
to be
it's a
military?
military court. It is under the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I was a military judge. My duties were essentially those of a federal district judge doing only criminal work, and whether an order they were given was lawful is a decision that the military judge will make. Um, just like any other court, you would have the attorneys on both sides write briefs on it and argue in front of the military judge, and the military judge will then decide whether the order itself was lawful. Now, there's still a military panel, which is similar to a jury, that the service member gets to hear the whole case if that's how they want to be tried. It really looks very much like a district court, federal district court criminal case for most purposes, except everybody's in uniform. Dress each other with rank. There's a lot of the military stuff, but the functions are very, very similar to a federal district court, and so the service member does have that. The problem you get in the military is that there's a lot of things that happen to service members short of a court martial. You can get discharged from the military. There's boards of inquiry. There are just things where you can eliminate a service member for conducting misconduct. It's not beyond a reasonable doubt as it would be at a court martial. If it is, it could result in negative law enforcement reports on the service member. Many of our National Guard members are also civilian law enforcement. If these things happen to them, they would probably also lose their civilian jobs. So there's a lot of things that can happen short of a court martial. A court martial is kind of the nuclear worst case scenario. If a service member was found to disobey an order that they should have obeyed, they may just get kicked out of the military with what we call bad paper, with less than honorable discharge.
So I just want to make sure that I understand this. So you've got these military courts that deal with members of the military and may or may not get to. So what I'm hearing is a court martial is kind of like where there's been an indictment and there are real charges and you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt.
Generally something that in the civilian world you would think of as a felony.
Okay.
That's not 100% accurate, but that's a good analogy to draw.
So where I'm having a question is all of these the entire military legal system, is that subordinate to the civilian military system? Like you said that the Supreme Court hasn't yet weighed in on the National Guard or what's going on in the Caribbean. So what is the federalism or the civilian military? I mean, I know our military is civilian led, but like, how does that shake out?
So there's appeals from a court martial, just like you read about civilian system. You can appeal a court martial, and each service, the Army, the Navy, the Marine Corps, they have one. The Coast Guard and the Air Force each have their own appellate court. So if you were convicted, you can then appeal to those courts. They generally follow other military cases. Then above the service courts, there's the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces. That is 5 civilians who are appointed by the president to 15-year terms, who oversee the military justice system, and they are directly below the Supreme Court. So our system, the military justice system, does fall under the Supreme Court. And similarly, you have a question on that?
I do, but I can wait. What were you going to say?
Similarly, Supreme Court decisions about deploying National Guard's troops. So that's the criminal side. Supreme Court decisions about deploying National Guard troops or active duty troops domestically, all those are binding on the executive branch, of which the military falls under.
Right.
So that is how civilian control of the military is implemented through the military justice system.
That's really interesting. So my question was going to be, okay, if you have these civilian judges at the ultimate sub Supreme Court level,
the Court of Appeals for the Armed Forces.
Court of Appeals, and they're in 15-year terms,
Right.
does it actually fall out that they have been appointed by a number of different administrations, or has any particular administration managed to appoint most or all of those?
No, they're pretty steadily rotating out.
Okay.
I have not looked at the recent, but when I was practicing before them, they were all about 2 to 3 years apart. So there was
I understand that the military is completely nonpartisan, and
it's not like a new administration comes in and puts 5 new judges on the court. They're on 15-year terms. At the end of their 15th year, they're a new one's appointed.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, those of you in the chat, definitely send in your questions. So my next question is about, okay, say the military appeals court makes a decision, or even the Supreme Court. There's no real enforcement mechanism for the courts in civilian. There sort of is, but not really.
Are we talking about like a domestic deployment now?
No, we're talking about like if the Supreme Court issues an order, there's nobody following up saying if the administration decides that they do not want to follow that order, there's no real way to compel them.
That's probably true, yes.
Is that the same in the military, or is there a definitive enforcement mechanism where you can say, okay, here's the order, you must do it, and here's how we're going to make you do it?
That's where it would get. That's where you essentially have, because the order goes to the executive branch. So the president is the commander-in-chief of the military. The president, which includes the National Guard, when they are under, they can be federalized, where they're under orders from the United States and not the state governor. And so essentially, if the Supreme Court were to stop the president or say the president couldn't do this, there's no enforcement mechanism, I think is what you're asking. It really becomes a political question or issue at that time. And at that time, that's when if individual service members came to us, we would have to talk them through what's going on. That's where you also have attorneys at every level of military command, from the Pentagon through all the different layers, and that's where they need to give their independent legal advice. And that's where commanders and senior leaders need to follow the law.
All right. So my next question is going to be about the National Guard and the federalization of it. But we have a question from the chat, which is, no war, then no war crime, just crime, right?
No, the international law and the law of armed conflict, it's actually not even called the law of war anymore. It's called the law of armed conflict. That's the term that's used because you recognize that we haven't had a declared war with the United States since 1945. But we've been in many, many armed conflicts, and the administration claims we're in an armed conflict now with the narco terrorists. So it is still, colloquially a war crime. It is technically a violation of the law of armed conflict.
Okay, excellent.
I think it's a good question. It's an interesting question.
Right, because that's what's been sort of floating around in the Substack world that we're sort of part of right now, is do we accept the framing that this is a war, or do we not, basically?
Right, and if you reject the framing that it's a war, then the actions are more illegal, or clearly illegal, because war, the law of war, the law of armed conflict, sanctions state violence and the killing of people. It's recognized that that's how society has been, and it legitimizes it. And if you're not in an armed conflict, then there should be no state violence like that.
Fair. Okay. So going back to my question about National Guard. So as I understand it, except for DC, which is not a state, the National Guard is under state control unless the government and the federal government nationalizes it and then
Correct.
takes over control.
Correct.
Is there any way for, and the way it's played out, this answer seems to be no, but is there any way for the state to say, no, you can't federalize my National Guard? Like the governor to say, like this is my National Guard, not your National Guard. You cannot have my National Guard. Or is it like the government wants it, the government takes it?
That's what a couple of the states are fighting about in court right now. So,
Okay.
The legal answer is we don't know right now. We haven't had these issues. Well, there are a few times in the past where the federal government has federalized National Guard over the governor's objection. That happened during the Civil Rights era. So generally, it has been done, and it has been done. That doesn't mean that some of the governors now aren't going to fight it, and there may be legal arguments for it, but it's happened before.
Right. Here we have a couple questions. If found guilty in military court of worst crime, what sentence can be expected?
Of the worst crime?
I mean, I guess that means if someone's been court-martialed of some of the most heinous.
The sentence, death is authorized in military courts martial for murder, essentially. And other than that, there can be very stiff penalties in the military court system. There's confinement for a number of years. You lose rank, you lose pay, you get dishonored. You can be dishonorably discharged or receive a bad conduct discharge. But it essentially very similar to the federal system on what the sentences can be. But death is authorized for murder.
Okay. Somebody also says, what are limits of retired officers in testifying before Congress? Are there limits, or what would the?
I don't know that there would be. I mean, so if you're subpoenaed by Congress and Congress orders you to testify, I'm a retired officer right now, and I am still subject to recall if the military so chose. But in general, and I think it's been a practice. It's one of those things that it may get fought out one day, but in practice, retired officers can testify before Congress fully. There's a few, arguably, restrictions on what they can say. For instance, under the Uniform Code of Military Justice, military officers cannot make contemptuous statements against the president, the vice president, Congress, the governor of a state they're in, a couple of secretaries. So arguably that may limit what a retiree can say, but contemptuous words is pretty extreme and pretty rash. So you can. It doesn't mean you can't criticize. It means you can't be contemptuous. But other than that, I don't know if there's any legal restrictions on a retiree testifying before Congress. In fact, there could be protections, because there are whistleblower protections, and there are other protections that can apply to congressional testimony.
Okay, that makes sense. So you just said you could be recalled.
Yes.
And that's something that the administration is threatening for Captain Kelly, right?
Correct.
Or Senator Kelly.
Yes.
When is that appropriate, or how does that work? Those are two different questions, I understand.
So it works. It's simply it depends upon the service branch, but there's a senior political official in the Army, for instance, who simply signs an order, just like any other military order, a personal order that says, Lieutenant Colonel retired Trevor Curry, you are recalled to active duty with duty at, the Pentagon effective this date. There are internal safeguards on it, and I mean there are reasons done. It's done if there's a mission that they wanted someone to accomplish, they can do that. it's not always about court martial. In this case, what they're looking at though is when it has happened in an issue with a court martial. Usually, military members who are retired and who were recalled to active duty are being charged for something they committed while on active duty. So, a child sex assault case they committed while on active duty, it gets discovered later. The military and you have military jurisdiction issues. If someone's retired to California, but they committed the misconduct in Texas and Virginia, you have an issue. So the military can then recall someone to active duty to try them in a court martial. Technically, they don't have to recall you to active duty. They can just court martial you. But for practical matters, they're usually recalled to active duty. So so it could be for a mission recent. We need 20 more JAGs, and we have retired JAGs, and we need you to come in and help us with this mission. Or if it's for a court martial, it's for something that was committed misconduct while on active duty. That's just the practice. That's how it usually works.
So here's a question, and I think after that we will wrap it up. Could you describe an order with dubious legality given to federalized National Guard deployed to a city with lively protesters on the street? It sounds as if any order short of shooting the protesters would be legal. That's a long, involved sentence. Let's see if we can break it down.
No, so one of the restrictions on the military is the Posse Comitatus Act, and we discussed that. And there's different ways you can. The restrictions on military when they are deployed domestically. The Posse Comitatus Act, and there's exceptions to it. So if one of the exceptions doesn't apply, basically the military cannot conduct law enforcement operations. So I'm going to put this into a disaster response. Something that's probably a little clearer. But let's say that the military goes down to New Orleans and we're supporting the governor and rescue operations. Posse Comitatus Act applies at this time. So if we're going to send helicopters out to help people who are trapped in flooding, or send a military convoy out to take food to an area that's cut off, that's fine. If the military members under federal orders were then told to also conduct a traffic control checkpoint at this place and search for contraband or illegal immigrants or something like that, that's a law enforcement operation. And if Posse Comitatus applied, then that would be a dubious order.
And if something's dubious, they come to you.
Right. And dubious is not a legal term, but it takes us into the realm where they would want to talk to an attorney and figure out what the order really is, what applies, that type of thing.
All right.
So let me take it to thinking more about it. Let's say there's protests and domestic unrest. There are very specific restrictions on conducting psychological operations against United States citizens by the military. And so if a psychological operations unit was brought in and told to conduct a PSYOP targeting this protest, that would be of dubious legality, which would then want to bring the attorney in, because I'm going to help you out with what dubious means and whether it's patently or manifestly or clearly unlawful, or you do need to obey the order, or what other options you have. Whistleblowing is one option that we're aware of that still protects the service member.
So now I'm really interested in what psychological operations might be used to come in and be used with.
We're talking hypotheticals.
No, I know, but now, hypothetically, no, this is not. I'm really not specifically talking about anything. You just got me really, really curious. Hypothetically, what could be a psychological operation that the military could use in wherever it is, any sort of time of protest? Just what is I'm not asking about legality. I'm just interested in what are the things that could go on.
So I'll put it this way. Overseas, when we're operating in, say, Iraq or Afghanistan, you could conduct a psychological operation against a leader of an insurgent cell and try to discredit him or her, spread rumors that they're doing something. You can do that to undermine their authority. So that's how you could do it. That's how it is. That's one of the ways it's done. Um, you also highlight the good things that the U.S. government and our partner Afghans and Iraqis were doing. Highlight the atrocities committed by the other side. That's how it's done, and in overseas operations. I don't want to.
Understood.
I wouldn't. I
Understood.
don't want to go down
Absolutely. I just wanted to make sure I knew what we were discussing here, and that made it very clear. Um, all right. Wow, we're at the top of the hour, so I want to say thank you so much. Thank you for being so patient during my early hour shenanigans. I want to give you a chance to let people know how, again, to find you guys and how to tell their service member contacts to contact you if they
Okay.
need to.
Sure. Yeah, it's ordersproject.com is our website. Our email address is ordersproject@nimj.org. That's the National Institute of Military Justice. And then the signal is at the Orders Project period 76. And really would love to hear from service members who are, things of dubious legality, because our concern is the service members are going to get caught in the middle, and they're going to take bad advice from either side and do things that may damage their career, their life, etc. We don't want a service member to. We certainly don't want a service member to obey an order that is clearly and manifestly unlawful. We also don't want a service member to make a stand or to disobey an order that they should also obey. So we're here to help the service members.
Right. And to remind those or let people know who weren't here at the beginning that you operate under basically an attorney-client privilege as a referral service. So
correct. Yeah, I'm an attorney. When a service member talks to me, it is privileged information. It's confidential. And if they have an issue that needs some ongoing legal advice, guidance on it, options, then I refer them out to. We have a referral list of attorneys. Most of us who have military experience and understand the Uniform Code of Military Justice, the culture, the repercussions, speak the language, all that.
All right, sounds great. Well, again, thank you so much for coming on.
Definitely.
I invite all of you to subscribe to Freedom Over Fascism at freedomoverfascism.us. If you can, paid would be great. Again, you could buy me a coffee. I will not spend it at Starbucks. And I want to thank Trep Corey and thank all of you for coming on. Thank you for Banner and Backbone for live streaming it. And I think it'll be on again. The video will come out today. The audio will come out today or tomorrow. And I'm pretty sure that Banner and Backbone will be doing a live restream, hopefully cutting off this stupidness at the beginning. So you'll have other chances to see it and tell people about it. So thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie. Thanks for giving me this opportunity.
Thanks. All right. Bye, everyone.